For context for the group, one of the reasons I was really excited to invite Nushin and Brian to speak with us today is because a lot of us are building businesses, more clinics around longevity. And a foundational pillar of that is nutrition. One of the big challenges that a lot of us face is how to actually implement nutrition plans that work for people. It's very easy to tell somebody that they need to take a Mediterranean diet or a ketogenic diet or a low carb diet, but it's quite another thing to actually have that work for people in their day-to-day life. A lot of us can feel somewhat helpless. So we tell people, oh, just try harder or keep a food log and all these sorts of things. But I think we can do better. And what Nushin and Brian have is some perspective on how we can do better through technology and some of the work they've been doing. I think the perspective they're going to share is going to be really relevant to a lot of the work that we're doing. Perhaps there might even be some ideas that come into mind for you all, in which how you might be able to work with some of the things they're working on. That being said, I'll turn it over to you guys, and I look forward to hearing what you have to share. If people have questions, please put them in the chat. We generally do questions at the end. Please put your questions in the chat as we go along. With that, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thank you, Nant, for inviting Brian and myself to present January AI and the science behind January AI and what might be helpful to understanding of cardiometabolic disease using wearable technology and food logs and prediction models that we have developed over time. And yeah, so Brian, if you want to say hello.
Brian Rowe. I help Nush on the commercial side of things. I've been here at January for almost 3 months now. Within 3 months, we've seen the company grow and develop from a technology standpoint. Really excited about what we have to share.
Right, thank you. Anant, you had a few questions that you had shared. Would you like me to go through those questions and try to answer those, or would you like me to take it in a different direction?
Well, I certainly have questions, as you know. If you guys would like to spend a few minutes talking about what you do and give people an overview of the perspective that you take, then we can dive into some of the questions so people have context.
Perfect.
Go ahead.
January AI was founded by myself and my co-founder, Mike Snyder. Mike Snyder is one of the world's foremost scientists in the area of multi-omics. Multi-omics is the idea that we want to understand people's health from a multitude of perspectives and not reduce our understanding of their health to a few biomarkers like their cholesterol and A1C. We would get a better picture of their health if we also looked at, for example, their genomics, and if we looked at their microbiome, proteomics, transcriptomics, if we looked at the wearable data that from their continuous glucose monitor, their continuous heart monitor, if we looked at their lifestyle and saw what they were actually eating, and so on. Some people even talk about screenomics at Stanford. So if we watched people's behavior online, we could understand a lot about their health and we could understand their trajectory. The idea of precision health, which is upstream from precision medicine, is maybe taking a step back. Everyone's familiar with precision medicine. The idea of, for example, sequencing genome of a tumor to understand exactly what kind of chemotherapy to give to a patient. Precision health is upstream from precision medicine, and it's the idea of taking stock of the various omics and perspectives of someone's health to then be able to predict and hopefully prevent and postpone chronic diseases. The data that Mike and I wanted to start with, we thought, well, multi-omics for consumers has been tried before. It has been tried by human longevity. For example, people were spending $25,000 and then later $8,000. And there were a lot of reports and a lot of analysis that were run that were not necessarily useful 20 years ago when we were running these things. Another organization came, Arivale, several years ago. They tried it at $4,000 a person. That didn't go very well either. Analyses tend to be expensive and the return wasn't there. So Mike and I had a vision to bring multi-omics to everyone through inexpensive wearables to begin with, build models, and then slowly expand them. That is exactly what we have done. We started learning at the intersection of continuous glucose monitors and heart rate monitors and lifestyle, like food logs. And then recently we've added blood tests. And now with our new product Mirror, we're adding other omics so we can understand a range of data. Our core work and research over the last 7 years has been around cardiometabolic health. We began our research at the intersection of two wearables and realized that food played an outsized role in glycemic response, more important than activity or time of eating. What determines glycemic response is the food that we eat. And we learned this empirically. So we built a big food database, and through machine learning and nonlinear modeling, attributed glycemic index or developed a model for creating glycemic index and glycemic load for complex foods, because the state of the art at that time was like 1,200 foods that were individual ingredients and no composite foods. So we created glycemic index and glycemic load for foods. Then we ran a clinical trial for a year and a half between 2018 and 2020 and associated people's glycemic response with the glycemic load of foods they were eating. This led us to our first prediction model in 2020, where we were able to predict people's glycemic response to the foods they were eating while they were wearing a CGM. So they would eat, let's say, hamburger and fries and shake during the training period, which is around 5 days. And then now they were going to eat chicken tikka masala, lassi, and dal. They did not eat that during the training period, but we could predict their glucose response very accurately to those next set of foods. So we did this in 2020, high level of accuracy, hours into the future. And we put out our first paper at the ADA in 2020. The next year, we were able to begin to predict people's glucose after the period of training when they were no longer wearing a CGM. We developed new models in 2022, and we were able to achieve our big innovation for which we've been recognized throughout. It's our virtual glucose monitor. After a period of training, you're able to remove the CGM and actually get glucose curves just like from a CGM, provided you continue to log your food and wear your smartwatch. In 2023, we had millions of data points from thousands of people, and we were able to develop a new model, a probabilistic model, that allowed us to remove all sensors. And once we understand someone's height, weight, gender, ethnicity, disease state, activity level, etc., we're able to provide probabilistic curves, what might happen to this person without wearing a CGM. Of course, if they want to have more precise information, they can get connected to a CGM. What is the purpose of glucose predictions? The purpose is mindful eating. The purpose is knowing before you stick something in your mouth how you might react to it. It is to use counterfactuals that AI provides to see, I could eat this whole thing, but if I ate half, this would be my curve. I could eat this whole thing, but if I ate 30% less, or if I didn't eat the crust or one of the breads. And you might say, I don't need AI to tell me that. But you actually do, because we are not very well educated on glucose as a people. And a lot of people think orange juice is such a great thing to drink, for example. They just don't know that it has very high glycemic load. You can go to any airport in America, 8 a.m. flight, and you'll see everyone has coffee and a donut. People just don't know the impact of foods on their blood sugar. With predictions, you're able to actually, for anyone who's interested in longevity, you're able to essentially manipulate foods and optimize them for glycemic response. And of course, you can add a CGM to get very precise with that. But even lacking a CGM, 138 million people in the US have prediabetes and diabetes. Only 10 million of them are insulin intense. So the rest, 128 million people in this country have diabetes and prediabetes, and they don't need a CGM. They just need to learn what they're eating. People are notoriously bad at estimating quantities. I'm always surprised. People say those two mini brownies or cookies have that many calories. AI is much better at estimating those than we are. We have combined our homegrown glucose predictions with other AI that has become available since the end of 2022. Now we have this magical experience. We can take a picture of a food and get its macros, but also get its predictive blood sugar with or without a CGM. And this allows people to say, oh, I had no idea. You can also edit it very easily. If you want to say it's not balsamic, it's this other thing, or it's not mayo, it's this garlic aioli, you can do it by voice very easily. We've combined these technologies now into this super easy to use magical experience so that everyone can know what's going on with their blood sugar, not just the wealthy people that can wear a CGM and not just biohackers who are up for sticking a needle in their arm, but everyone can know.
Awesome. Well, that's so cool. And that's one of the reasons why I was so excited to invite you guys to speak, is because this is a way in which I think we can not just be more successful at what we do clinically as longevity clinicians, but also, just to touch on the point you just mentioned, how we can make it more accessible, right? Because I think all of us who are here on this call and are eventually listening to this are here to help as many people as we can. And right now, a lot of the tools and approaches we have are out of reach for many people. And so that to me is one of the other really cool features about what you guys have done. And just to summarize in a couple of lines for people who've just joined, what Brian and Nasheen have built is an approach to predict glycemic responses without a CGM. They have built artificial intelligence that has learned from hundreds of thousands of data points to predict how individual foods will cause a glycemic response. If you use a CGM for a few days, their tool will learn better about how your body responds. But even without that, pretty good correlations can be established. So I'm curious, like, you guys have a ton of data about CGMs, and there's many different CGM parameters that a lot of us look at, like area under the curve, peak to trough variability, time and range. Is there any particular metric from everything that you've seen that seems to predict metabolic resilience? What are the metrics that we as clinicians who are looking at CGM tracings from our patients, what should we pay most attention to based on your data?
Yeah, so we treat CGM as a raw signal that needs to be processed before it becomes useful. Noise can come from a variety of things like hydration, sensor lag, stress. So we stabilize readings by basically averaging multiple meal responses and focusing on stable metrics like AUC, peak height, recovery slope, and time and range. Once the noise is filtered, we contextualize the curves. Two people might spike on rice, but one returns to baseline quickly, but the other one, keeps the one that obviously comes back to baseline quickly is more resilient than someone else where the glucose stays up for much longer. So they obviously have impaired clearance. The distinction drives personal guidance. So we can figure out, okay, so these are all baked into our models. Why this is so significant is that A1C is like an average 90-day number, while this is a constant thing that has gone into the model that we can look at. So instead of a snapshot, we can show dynamic flexibility. In one of our studies, even power users improved their time and range from like 81% to 88%. So it really does make a difference to be able to see these things and figure out essentially how to optimize your nutrition, for example, eating things in a different order.
So I think what I heard there is that the first thing is that as clinicians, if we're looking at CGM tracings, we have to be aware that there is inherent noise to the tracings we're looking at. And what you guys do is help to filter out some of that noise by running it through your platform. But then once the noise is kind of normalized, would you say that AUC is the most important metric?
Yes.
AUC? Okay.
AUC, peak to baseline slope in terms of insulin efficiency, and then time and range. I think those are definitely the most important metrics.
Then are there specific, no, I know, specific numbers is always going to be personal, but are there any statistics or any numbers worth sharing?
Well, everything I would tell you would be super generic. Population health is not the way to practice medicine. We believe in personalized medicine. The idea of keeping your glucose super low all the time is a ridiculous idea. And I know a lot of longevity clinics. I know one one CGM wrapper company that told everybody their glucose couldn't be higher than 110, which I think I mean, I literally talked to people who had become obsessive with this. And of course they lost weight. So they thought the company was great, but it's just unnatural. Your glucose is going to go up if you are a healthy person and get on a bike for 2 hours, your glucose is going to be very high. There's nothing wrong with that. Also, if you're metabolically fit, there's nothing wrong with eating something that takes your glucose up because then it will drop. That's not a problem. If you're not metabolically fit, then you need to watch for glucose dispersion because literature shows that if you're not metabolically fit and in some stage of disease, you are not benefiting from glucose dispersions are going to be bad for you because you're totally stressing your metabolic system. And then you have all this extra glucose sitting in your bloodstream that then we know what happens when that happens. You get multiple damaged into multiple organs over time from
Yes.
neuropathy to, et cetera.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. I'm sure a lot of people on this call can relate to that. I certainly know I can, having worked with CGMs for probably 5 years now in patient care, seeing that phenomenon where people initially were obsessively trying to keep their numbers in a certain range and not appreciating that metabolism is meant to be dynamic. What I often say is let's not compare ourselves to a number of glucose, let's compare ourselves to our own bodies when we were healthiest. So, for example, take a child, right? Like a 3 or 4 year old child who has no reason, unless assuming they don't have any kind of inborn metabolic issues, their metabolism is perfect. If you give them sugar or candy, the spike is not the problem. If you eat something that has a lot of sugar, you will have a spike. The problem is not the spike. The problem is the recovery and how that goes. I'd like to think that we're getting better at our understanding of this, but it is challenging because people are so used to being told things in a very simplistic way. I'm glad that you all are trying to communicate the nuance in what you're
Yeah,
doing.
I would focus on how fast is this person's glucose coming down. If it's not coming down very fast, I remember 7 years ago or 8 years in 28 years ago when I started wearing CGMs, I used to have a favorite soft serve in San Francisco, By Right soft serve. I would have it with whipped cream and organic brownie bits. I remember the first time I saw my blood sugar after I had that. I took the soft serve in a bowl and I was sitting in a car and I was driving. So I was eating about a fourth of how much I would have normally eaten the whole bowl. And my glucose not only went up, but over the next hour, my glucose was not coming down. When you see the area under the curve, you just go, wow, like this just, it's astonishing. So both to that food, but just understanding, oh my God, what have I been doing the whole time? When it's not coming down, it shows that there is either way too much glucose in that food, or you're just not as metabolically fit to manage all of that. You don't have enough insulin to take that up because either your cells are full of glucose already from prior meals or from other things. So yeah, I think AUC is very, very important. And we want to see how metabolically fit people are. If they're metabolically fit, don't fret about their numbers.
Yeah, well said. I think a lot of us on this call appreciate the importance of mindset when it comes to longevity and not letting pursuit of longevity cause anxiety or obsessiveness and how that if that is happening, that is probably net counterproductive. Once you get to that point, you're probably doing more harm than good. I really appreciate your perspective. Let me move on to some other things here. Obviously, the biggest driver of our glucose curves and our metabolic response is the food that we eat, but we also are becoming aware of other things that can contribute to this, like sleep, stress, even things like the microbiome. Are there any of these that particularly stand out, or are there any? I'm sure it's all personal, but is there anything that you want to highlight with respect to other influences on glycemic responses? And maybe if something stands out and is really worth focusing on based on the data that you guys have?
Yeah, so obviously microbiome is a big deal. Circadian rhythm, prior meals are a big deal. If you have more fiber in your stomach, if you have fiber in the last 24 hours, it's going to make a huge difference. If you have broccoli and then you have Doritos versus if you have Doritos followed by Doritos, you're going to have a completely different impact. Stress hormones obviously make a big difference. But in terms of what we have seen just telling people to avoid sugar is really a terrible idea because we've tried that for decades and that just doesn't work. It's in our DNA to like a little bit of sweetness, and to try to avoid it altogether is very hard for the majority of people to sustain. But in terms of what matters, I would say the number one thing we found in our research, we actually developed a supplement. We developed a 3-in-1 symbiotic, prebiotic, probiotic, polyphenols. We developed a wet lab, and we developed our own proprietary assays and undertook a substantial study of prebiotics that had never been done before. What we learned is that fiber keeps your blood sugar down. We came up with a combination of fibers, polyphenols, and probiotics that actually reduces your blood sugar overall. But if you had one dietary intervention, it's to increase fiber in your diet, because fiber has shown in other literature and in our literature to keep your blood sugar down. In a human study for a supplement, we used to give people what we call a Trader Joe's rice challenge. We took the same Trader Joe's rice and gave it to people with our fiber prior, and then they had it by itself. The difference is night and day. So we are not the only people that have produced literature on fiber lowering glycemic response to foods. So, and fiber is connected also to your microbiome. So that's long-term development and cultivation of a good microbiome, of course, is going to overall improve your metabolic health 100%. It will also have other benefits like building immunity, lowering your inflammation. And we can talk about what sustains a good microbiome. But fiber is critically important. I would say that's number one. If you did nothing else for your clients, I would say, our ancestors used to eat, 100 to 150 grams of fiber a day. But the modern American diet, people are getting 10 to 15 grams of fiber a day. And we are in collective dysbiosis. It's one of the reasons we have so much inflammation and so much chronic disease, also because we've destroyed our microbiome with antibiotics. I think fiber not only makes you feel full, but also lowers your blood sugar. It helps you lose weight and helps you produce GLP-1 agonists naturally. That's what fiber does. So it's critically important, your microbiome. Of course, your circadian rhythm is really important, but I would also say sleep. If you don't get enough sleep, you could we've learned, not in our own research, but we've learned reading literature that even one night of, like, if you don't sleep at all one night, you can put yourself into insulin resistance. Like, you can increase your chances of insulin resistance. It's that bad. But when you don't sleep well, the next day your control hormones don't get produced, like ghrelin, and you're more likely to want to eat carbs. You can't stop yourself because you don't have the control hormones, because you haven't produced them because you didn't sleep well. This becomes a cycle, downward cycle. So I would say really important to have fiber and really important to sleep well, because if you don't sleep well, you're not going to eat well.
Got it. Super interesting. And then with respect to fiber, is there any particular type of fiber or food that is worth highlighting as a source of fiber? Or another question would be, is the impact of fiber the same whether it comes from a supplement versus from a whole food? Any kind of detail you can give on the fiber piece?
The best fiber for you is the fiber that you're going to eat. For example, berries are not created equal. Everybody wants to eat blueberries because blueberries have more lactobacillus than yogurt. They're very good for your microbiome. 1 cup of raspberries has 7 grams of fiber. I would eat raspberries any day over strawberries. Strawberries are good for vitamin C, but they don't really have value for your microbiome the way that raspberries do. Raspberries are very powerful. 1 cup, 7 grams. Average woman should be aiming for 21 to 25 grams of fiber a day. A man should be aiming for 30 to 38 grams of fiber a day. How do you want to get that? Well, 2 cups of broccoli is 7 grams of fiber. 1 cup of raspberry is 7 grams of fiber. Let me tell you what I do. I take a supplement in the morning. So I take Edens, what we develop, which we sold to ZBiotics, by the way. Edens is now under the ZBiotics flag and will be modified and come out as a ZBiotics product in the future. I take Edens, so it's a fiber supplement with protein powder, with collagen, with creatine in the morning with water. No no almond milk, sugar, fruit, nothing. I take that because I have cardiovascular risk, and intermittent fasting is actually a bad idea for me, and the literature says so. So that just strains my cardiometabolic system. I don't need that. So I take a no carb protein shake in the morning. And that's one way I get fiber through a supplement. And yes, supplements do work. Of course, not all supplements are created equal. Our supplement was unique because it had 7 different kinds of fiber in it. It wasn't just one fiber. If you go to Metamucil, that's just psyllium husk. I think Benefiber is something else. One of the other ones is just resistant potato starch. A lot of these supplements on the marketplace are a single fiber. Would I take it over no fiber? Yes, I would, as long as you realize that Metamucil can make 30% of people more constipated than to help them. And the purpose of fiber is not for motility. The purpose of fiber is not for the benefit of fiber that we're discussing here has to do with lowering your blood sugar. It is not about motility. Do I believe that fiber should come from natural foods and supplements? Yes. I think Brian would be hard pressed to eat 38 grams of fiber a day. You can, but it's hard to do. So what do? I take my protein shake in the morning. At lunchtime, I eat a very high fiber lunch with protein. And then 4 o'clock every day. If you see me at a conference in Saudi Arabia next week, you'll see that I will have brought my veggies from California in a box. I refrigerate them in my hotels wherever I go. If I'm on the road for 10 days, I take 10 boxes of veggies with me. I eat raw veggies every single day at 4 o'clock. In my box of veggies, I have broccoli, I have fennel, I have endive, but you can mix in as long as they're low carb. So don't eat jicama, a box of jicama, that's not going to help you. But broccoli has a lot of fiber, so I've chosen that. And then for dinner, again, I eat high fiber, a high protein meal, and occasional other things. But fiber, I can't say enough about fiber.
Awesome.
Thorn has a decent one, Fiber Mend. You can use that one.
I was going to say there was a question that came in about the name of the supplement that you.
The name of the supplement we sold to ZBiotics is called Eden's Gut Health, but ZBiotics is not putting it out yet. They're just going to redo it and rebrand it, and they are making some modifications to it, and they're going to put it out as a ZBiotics product. They have their own probiotics, so they are going to modify things and put that out. Thorn Fibermend is one possible thing that I recommend to people. Ideally, if you can eat a variety of foods, food diversity is critically important. For your microbiome, keeping that red meat, which is inflammatory, there's literature around it. I'm not making this up. Red meat is inflammatory. By eating a ton of red meat, you're lowering your immunity. Our ancestors were eating mostly fruits and nuts and berries. They would hunt and eat meat for a while, but it wasn't available daily. They also had access to honey and sweet things sparingly. We've just taken that and made it all like indulge, like sugar and meat all the time. Of course, we get sick when we do that.
Awesome. I'm going to shift to some audience questions and then we can hop back to some of the other questions I had, but just to prioritize the people who are listening live. So Kasim asks thoughts on PHGG, partially hydrolyzed guar gum, as well as tolerated fiber supplement, which can lower postprandial spikes. I was actually just looking at the Thorn Fiberman. I think that has guar gum in it. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, guar gum is a very typical fiber that's used. We used to actually mix guar gum and put it on it. It's pretty hard to eat if you had the raw stuff, but the kind of stuff we did to ourselves is unbelievable. We used to eat and walk in the office. We used to call it prancercising, and even prancercising lowered your blood sugar. So that's how we gave that science to the world. And then I think Glucose Goddess popularized it that you need to walk after a meal. But we did that in 2017, about 8 years ago. But yes, guar gum does bring your blood sugar down.
So the next couple of questions are kind of more business oriented. One thing relates to behavior change, and obviously behavior change is a big part of this whole process. Are there any metrics that show sustained engagement about behavior change that you guys can share, especially among people who are healthy users and not diagnosed with a serious disease? Any data you can share on sustainability of behavior change like that? I think you're muted.
In both of our most recent papers in NPJ Digital Medicine in November of 23 and January of 2025, we've shown that we can get people to change behavior. We can get them to eat fewer carbs, fewer calories. We can get them to eat more protein, more fiber. We can get them to essentially increase their time in range and also lose weight, although weight loss was never the purpose of our programs. We have definitely had people stay engaged for longer period of times, like 33 days, for example, to continue to play the experiential games of, okay, I eat this, what happens if I eat that, or looking things up. We have not done any randomized clinical trials for 12 months. Did the person maintain their weight? But we have a lot of anecdotal evidence. For example, one of our machine learning advisory board members, Zico Coulter, who's a professor of AI at CMU, when he went on our program a few years ago, he lost 20 pounds. He adopted intermittent fasting and maintained his weight. And it's now been 4 years later since he started doing that. So we have a lot of anecdotal evidence around weight loss and behavior change. Once people learn that they can add fiber to their diet, once they learn about habit stacking, like protein before carbs and having fiber, protein before they eat carbs, when they learn that they can do things very quickly, like by taking pictures of a food, being able to get insights, when they see that it's not such a big deal to do that, they're able to incorporate these into their lives pretty easily. I think the experiential part of our work was really significant. We used to give to thousands of people an oral glucose tolerance test, an OGTT. So we would actually send them a sugar shot that they would have to take. One day they would be on a sugar shot. One day they would eat their breakfast that they normally eat. And then one day we would give them a recipe for a keto breakfast that they would make with eggs and cheese. We would compare these curves for them. And that's just incredibly enlightening. So once people saw those things, they could see if their breakfast was closer to pure glucose or how healthy their breakfast was. And those are sustainable behavior change. Basically, people see that. Myself, I was a hot chocolate connoisseur. I was going around the world drinking the best hot chocolate until I saw my blood sugar with hot chocolate. It's liquid and full of sugar, and your glucose just shoots up directly. Once you see these things, it's very sustainable. I dropped my hot chocolate habit, absolutely 100%. So it is sustainable once you believe that it's true. It's not good. For a period of time after that, I had half a cup and then I just quit. It is sustainable and we've seen it, but we haven't run randomized clinical trials in terms of like, how are people doing in terms of their time in range 12 months out after this experiment.
For sharing that. And then one more, kind of building what you just said, are there any learnings you have about how best to engage or target people who are sick, like people who have comorbidities, versus people who are quote unquote healthy? Is there any difference in how you engage with those different groups?
Absolutely, hugely different. I would say people who have comorbidities don't have a lot of stomach for technology. They have too many things that are going wrong. In our studies, we have done design thinking. We've interviewed hundreds of people that have diabetes and prediabetes. We've interviewed families of people who have diabetes and doctors of people who have diabetes. We learned that, there's a high correlation between diabetes and depression. A lot of people that have diabetes don't have a why. They're not thinking, oh, I want to be vibrant so I can play with my grandkids. They don't see the connection between their health and their vitality in terms of their presence for other people and things. So I think you can the people that are disease free that come to you for longevity, I think they are much more interested and open to experimentation of whether it's using peptides or putting them through. How about if instead of 2 glasses of wine every night, try 4 weeks of no wine? They might be able to do that. They could say, okay, I can do that for 4 weeks. So you can do a lot of experimentation with people that are on that healthier trajectory because they're more open to possibilities. I think people with multiple chronic diseases It comes down to the basics. Sleep is one of the most important things. Of course, if you're depressed, you can't sleep. But I think multiple chronic diseases, I think it comes down to basics. I think if you can lower inflammation, that's one of the most important things for someone with multiple chronic diseases. They probably have high inflammation. So an anti-inflammatory diet would be absolutely a must. They need to stay away from, fried foods and refined sugars. The best way is to get them to take pictures of their food, make it fun for them. But staying away from inflammatory foods, and again, red meat is inflammatory, dairy is inflammatory, a lot of sugary vegetables like corn is inflammatory. So you want to stay away from fried foods. So I would reduce inflammation for anyone who's having multiple chronic diseases. If they have anything like Crohn's disease, leaky gut, you don't want to give them a lot of fiber because that's just going to exacerbate their problems. But if they don't have GI issues, I would say inflammation is one to focus on. Lower inflammation through diet, definitely. And dial their sleep 100% because it's just this vicious cycle. And getting an Oura ring, pretty simple, $300, pretty easy. It's totally passive. They can just throw that on. They don't have to do anything. Taking pictures of their food, really good idea. But trying to lower inflammation, lock down sleep, activity, that's hard to get people to do. Moving after, if they have a dog, to move after meals is really helpful, makes a big difference. Of course, walking doesn't lower your cholesterol. You have to do HIIT training to lower your cholesterol. So again, for your person that is more healthy, you can say, hey, this is your VO2 max now. This is where I want your VO2 max to be. Here's your plan to get from where you are to this other. But if somebody has multitude of chronic diseases, they may not be very open to improving their VO2 max or their body composition. So I really believe in the basics. Take a look at the body composition, look at visceral fat, look at what we're dealing with under the size. Super believer in DEXA scan and body composition, super believer in VO2 max to understand people's essentially that angle of their health, trying to lower, their inflammation as much as possible through diet. And that will also lower their blood sugar at the same time, which will be really important in improving their sleep. I would say those are some of the basics.
Thank you for sharing all that. I'm sure there are a number of people on this call who are interested to see how they might be able to use this technology for their patients and in their practice. Can you share a little bit about how they might be able to do that?
Yes, absolutely. So someone's asking your position in reimbursability. So product doesn't cost that much. The needle free, I think it's like $60. Even with with you can attach it to your CGM. We're not charging people for CGM. So if they have their own CGM, it costs about 60 to $80 a year. It's pretty inexpensive. It's available on iOS. We are working on a clinician dashboard so that if a clinician is managing a longevity clinic, they can see the health of all of their patients at once. They could see what's time and range for this population. They should be able to see all of that. If you're interested, I can show you some of the mock-ups of what that dashboard is going to look like. You can easily give this to your patients and have them basically just take pictures, just to have fun with it. Take pictures of your food and see your predicted blood sugars. Give them fun hacking exercises to try to keep their hugely spiking foods to a few times a week. So you're not spiking every day, all the time, every meal. Sure, have a cheat day or not even a cheat day. I would say cheat day is a bad idea. Maybe cheat meal is a good idea. Cheat day sounds excessive.
So while people are waiting for the dashboard or while you guys are working on that, the name of the app is January AI. Is that what people should put into the App Store?
Yes, it's a yellow logo.
Yeah, so if anyone has patients who could benefit from this, have them check that out in the App Store. I've certainly given it a shot. For me, the interesting observation has been, and you guys will see this once you use it in the app, especially once you are getting those predicted glucose responses, just seeing that can kind of change your behavior. And it almost reminds me of, if you guys go to, I think in New York City and some other places, when you look at a menu, it has like the calories next to it, how like just seeing that information can make you make different choices. This is a similar type of thing, except in this case with glucose response. So I thought that was super interesting. Any other questions? I guess if people want to put those in while we're waiting for any other questions, anything else that you guys want to share about multiomics or glucose control, anything else that you think people should know in these last few minutes here?
Yeah, check out papers by Mike Snyder from his IPOP study at Stanford. It's Mike Snyder at Stanford. You can go to Snyder Lab. They have a lot of papers on glucotypes, on angiotypes. There's quite a few papers that have come out over the years on this. There's also great literature with Mike on studies about, for example, is fiber more important or fermented foods? So fermented foods are tremendously better for you. They're really good. So we should be eating fermented foods every single day. There's so much more on the science. It's really exciting. I want to give Brian an opportunity to also say a few words.
Yeah, no, and I would encourage everyone, please visit our website. There's some information about January Mirror on there, which can take all these multi-omics from your wearables, your DEXA scan, nutritional information, supplement information, and generate a report based on all these different touch points and results, and create a personalized, individualized plan just for you, grounded in clinical context. So it's very impressive. And if anybody wants to try it out or see what January Mirror is, feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for sharing and for speaking with everyone today. I don't see any additional questions. So thank you both for coming once again. I think glucose control and nutrition more broadly is foundational to health. And with what you guys have done, we now have a strong way of getting much more precise about it. I also really appreciate you guys sharing some insights from the data set that you guys have, which is probably much bigger than most anyone else in the world about glucose and glucose regulation. So we really appreciate that. We'd love to have you guys back again sometime in the future if you're open to it. There's so many different ways that we can dive deep. I feel like fiber was a thread that we could have kept pulling on for another 30 minutes if we had the time. I think there's so many different ways that we can take this. Please keep us posted when you have that provider dashboard available. I think there would be a lot of people interested in that because a lot of us have our patients on nutrition plans, but we don't have great tools to measure what's going on and help them be more successful, right? So I think this can be really helpful, and we look forward to seeing updates on that.
Thank you so much for having us. Like Brian said, please check out Mirror. This is our multi-omic knowledge graph. You can throw in all of your patients' data and you can get reports out. We would be very interested. We'll pay you to use it. We're very interested in working with doctors to give us feedback on the report. The report is mostly patient facing right now, but we can easily create physician facing reports that are much more clinical in nature. But do check out January Mirror. It's very different than throwing your data into GPT or Gemini. We do all sorts of things under the hood to reduce hallucinations to under 1%. These models are amazing, but they hallucinate like crazy and with confidence. So try January Mirror, and we would love to come back and talk about Mirror or Fiber or any other topic.
Well, thank you both for joining us this morning, and thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for your time.
Bye.